Good morning, everybody. As usual, I have the privilege of attempting to present something that's like a systems thinking methodology in a soundbite world in only 1 hour. So I have about 72 hours worth of material. And if you guys ever listened to, who was the guy upstairs, the botanist guy, if you thought he talked fast, wait till you see what we're going to do. What you see right here, this is New Forest Farm. This was actually taken about 5 years ago, aerial photograph. We see we're surrounded by corn and beans. What kind of a crazy kid when he was in his mid-20s graduates from college $50,000 in debt, no job, no prospects of jobs, goes to a permaculture design course, has his world changed, and decides to borrow more money and get into farming, where he goes to southwest Wisconsin to grow 2 crops that aren't grown in Wisconsin because one of them won't survive. So you breed the plants that you need in order to go ahead and survive there and pay your way as you go. Oh, how do you like that? So yeah, do epic stuff. These days, these things are really trendy these days, especially in permaculture circles. You know, from biomass to biofuels, electric vehicles, wind for mechanical power, wind for electricity, photovoltaics, hydraulic rams, et cetera, et cetera. These things are the doodads. These are not the pattern, they're the details. What we need in permaculture is the pattern. The details will work themselves out as we figure them out. We can change every single one of these things on farms worldwide, and if we don't change the way we produce our foods, none of these will matter. None of these will matter at all. I first heard the word permaculture, I was in the mid to late 80s, and I've practiced this last night, I've practiced over and over again, I can't do it justice. I first heard Bill Mollison say this. He said, "The aim is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable." It can be as simple or sophisticated as you like. When I heard that phrase, the aim is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable, I said, this is the Rosetta Stone to living on planet Earth. We can earn our livelihood, it's ecologically sound, and we can do permanent agriculture. Well, through the years, of course, there's Uncle Bill. Yay, Bill wrote the book. I have a first edition hard copy of the Permaculture Designer's Manual. It's so old that in the back of it is listed everybody who ever took a design course. It's like, wow. So I wrote a book, Restoration Agriculture. The premise of restoration agriculture is that, and I know you guys are here, so you're not totally clueless, this planet absolutely needs ecological restoration. Absolutely needs it. As a trained ecologist, I came to find out that restoration ecology has come to mean getting a piece of land, taking it away from the human food supply, and then we input all kinds of things. We buy all kinds of plants and trees and grasses, and we use herbicides to control. It becomes this massive expense to come up with this system that we say is natural, but we're trying to arrest it and hold it as a snapshot in time. It's not a full, dynamic, living, breathing, interconnected piece. We need ecological restoration, and we need agriculture. We got to eat. We need food, fuels, medicines, and fiber. A little bit of a distinction here. With agriculture and with food, I'm talking about the staple food crops. By farmers, I mean the people who actually grow the quantities of staple food crops that keep us alive, the things that makes our meat, our muscle, and our bones. And we can have the whole entire planet, all the little cities painted green with permaculture paradises, and you still don't have enough food. How many of you guys ate today? Okay, you ate from farms. You ate from stuff that was planted mechanically, maintained mechanically, harvested mechanically, processed mechanically, transported mechanically, and maybe even cooked mechanically, and a little beep, 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 you know. Get over it, okay? There's not enough land in like the city of Chicago or in Los Angeles to produce the staple food crops that we need. We can get our vegetables, our vitamins, and our minerals, but no one has shown me anywhere ever yet where anyone ever is producing their food in their own front yard. We can have all kinds of stuff going on, but we need farms. So if we're going to have farms, we might as well have permaculture farms. So the whole premise of restoration agriculture is we're going to go to an area, we're going to identify the biome, what are the keystone species in it, and then we're going to imitate it, not in a wild system that we then maintain and hold in that static state, but as an active farm, and we're harvesting the products from there. And we're going to do it in such a way that we're paying our bills and building true equity in the system. Oh, great, now it comes disconnected. There we go. All right, so why restoration agriculture? If you guys were here at the previous speaker, Paul mentioned a lot about the, like the purple breathers and stuff like that. I think that's a great term. I actually had to stop using the word permaculture. I moved to the Midwest where everybody had their hair like this and not down to here, and they were, ball caps and chewing tobacco and stuff like that. I couldn't even get like parts at the hardware store because they'd look behind me to, talk to the guy behind me. So I had to costume, shave my hair, wear the hat just like those guys. And around, over and over again, I've seen what permaculture has come to turn into, and I had to distance myself a little bit because what I am not talking about, things that are really cool but inappropriate in that particular location. And the Cobb pizza oven is a perfect example. It's a great idea. It's a wonderful idea. That's not permaculture. That's a detail. It's not the pattern. That's a bit. But because we go to this course, we don't know what else we can do. Let's do a pizza oven, a mud pizza oven. This person is in Vermont. They want to make a Cobb pizza oven because this is sustainable. So they dig up all kinds of mud, they mix it with hay, and then they haul all kinds of rocks and pile the rocks up and put the mud pizza on. You fire it for a while, Well, 50 inches of rain, a mud pizza oven doesn't last very long. It does this. Why didn't they make a stone pizza oven? That's a more appropriate use. Why not use these ideas as a framework for us to think about how do we live on planet Earth instead of, oh, this is what I do, this is what I do. And how about real world? I use the word real word in the title of my book. How about real design that's based on reality? The rain barrel is a perfect example. This little 10 by 10 square here on the deck will shed 62 gallons of water in a 1-inch rain. A 40 by 40 house, that's what, 1,400, 1,500 gallons. This is a design hallucination, and this is giving everybody, permaculturists, real permaculturists, a bad name. Because it rains an inch, 4,500 gallons of water come roaring down the barrel, overflows, goes down to the basement, the rug gets wet, black mold, kids get asthma and have to go to Mexico because their health insurance won't cover them up here. Design failure number 1. 6 weeks go by, now you gotta water your tomatoes because I'm a permaculturist and I have 6 tomato plants in my weed spiral, crackgrass spiral, thistle spiral, So you go, half the water's evaporated, you water 4 plants and you're out of water. Design failure number 2. By doing systems that are not based on the actual reality of the actual rain that falls from the sky, the actual surface area that's collecting it, the actual needs when I need to store this and deliver it and utilize it, if it's not based on reality, it's bullpucky and needs to stop. That said, these yards here, every single residential structure should be permaculture to the max. Every city that we have, if there's a thing in it that's green, it should be food, fuels, medicine, fiber, everywhere available, wherever we go. This needs to happen, and we still need food. Because what all these people do, you guys included, 99% of the world's staple foods, carbohydrates, proteins, and oils, come from annual plants. In an annual plant, by nature, you have to destroy a living, 3-dimensional perennial ecosystem in order to expose the soil. You either mulch it to death, you cut it, burn it, and plow it, or you use herbicide to burn it down to the bare black dirt. In order to plant your annual plants, you have to destroy the real living planet in order to throw in a handful of seeds. Every culture that has ever relied on annual plants for their staple food crops has ended in collapse. We go back here 6, 8, 10,000 years, see this pretty picture here. The oldest, most sustainable technology, I would call it that, I guess, a human life way on the planet is the hunter-gatherer culture, where extended family bands would migrate from resource abundance to resource abundance, and pretty seasonal. You'd follow fish or migration patterns or animals, or the nuts are ripe here and the berries are ripe there. That's still ongoing. There are still cultures that haven't emerged yet, and they're getting pushed to almost extinction. They haven't emerged yet from the natural planet. The second longest life pattern is a pastoralist nomad. You just think of the Maasai wandering across the plains with all their animals with them. They also went from location to location based on seasonal abundance. Both of those cultures are still alive. The hunter-gatherer getting pushed to extinction, pastoralist nomads being forced on a little piece of land, and then they have to go around and around and around and around, and they overgraze the place, turn it into deserts, is actually causing a problem, not by the nature of their lifestyle, but by the nature of what civilized, humanity did to them and forced them to stay in one place. So all of a sudden, 6 to 10,000 years ago, simultaneously around the world, there was a global drying, global warming. Most of the ice had melted and all the rivers had run off. There was an extinction of the mass megafauna. They say within 1,000 years, all the big, huge, Pleistocene, dire wolves and Irish elk and cave bears and stuff like that disappeared within 1,000 years. People started to settle down, stay in one place. There was a formerly horizontal social structure that was fairly egalitarian, turned into a hierarchical top-down structure. There was priests, kings, warriors, merchants, peasants. Slavery started, ritual misogyny, head binding, foot binding, that whole sort of thing. I mentioned slavery. The standing military became part of it. And what fueled it all was a switch in human diet from mostly perennial plants to annual plants, and relying exclusively on annual plants. You got to think about how the annual plant grows. For a few months, grows like crazy. Then it produces 60, 130-fold and all that kind of stuff, and then boom, collapse. Our civilizations have followed the life cycle of the annual plants ever since the dawn of time. All around the world, from the Middle East, Greece, look at this guy right here. These were not tiny little structures. When workers went out there to work on these buildings, do you think they did it for the joy and creativity of building the beautiful Acropolis to the, great god, whoever, Mazusio? They did it at the end of a knife, a point, a spear, dogs, in chains. These palaces were not made by people plying their craft and being ultimately creative. And look at the wasteland that these places are in. Why on earth would people build cities in wastelands? Well, cities weren't built in wastelands. Cities are located in the richest, most fertile places, deep soil, plenty of water. You need water for transportation, for communication. You need plenty of timber for cooking, for building materials, and of course for machines of war. And of course you got to clear all the trees out anyways because you have to plant your annual crops. At the end of a civilizational period, what happens is all of a sudden the powers that be start to throw out these things because they're realizing their game's falling apart. So they put out the boogeyman. Let's be scared of these people who are going to be coming down from Mongolia and invading our culture. This was the ultimate works project, public works project. They kept this thing going for 1,000 years. Nobody ever invaded tried to go across that wall. I mean, there was nobody on the way, but this false bugaboo, oh my goodness. Somebody blew up a building, they flew a plane into it. We better invent a whole new infrastructure and hire all these unemployable people because if we don't, there's going to be larger unemployment. Do you think of how many people now have jobs because of the TSA that were unemployed before? It's an amazing works project. Let's just go make a wall, right? Yeah, right. Or so these funny little pointy things. So some little 11-year-old kid who inherited everything from daddy, who finally died, gets coins in his eyes and floats across the river Nix or whatever he's doing. The culture of annual crops agriculture is by nature, fundamentally destroys the resource base. It goes and finds a resource that's in relative abundance at the time, because it was probably more abundant before, then it extracts it, it consumes it, it utilizes it, and then it throws it away as waste. Just does. This is an interesting place. This is Mount Lebanon. Around the world, there are several different places that the climatic conditions are such that they create these nice, cool, misty winters and long, hot, dry seasons in the summertime. And those are the regions that are home to the largest plants on the planet. There's a kauri in New Zealand, alerce in South America, the sequoia and the redwood in North America. And in the Middle East, that happens to be the cedars of Lebanon. They were the redwoods of the Middle East and North Africa. This was taken in 1999. These are the last patches of the cedars of Lebanon on the planet, the last natural patches, native stands. This is what annual agriculture does. This is what annual agriculture civilization has done, and this is an example of what does our civilization look like after 10,000 years? All you got to do is turn on the news and you see what it looks like. Of course, we won't do that here, not in our country. No, scientifically, designed agriculture. We have all kinds of systems in place. We'll never lose all fertility. Pesticide runoff, leaching potential. My place is located right at the Minnesota-Iowa border over in Wisconsin, 30 miles. Our well water is contaminated with atrazine and nitrates. Now, isn't it fascinating? On one hand, we're told by the wizard that, it takes geological eons to recharge the aquifers, and yet we got poison down there in 60 short years. Folks, we can recharge the aquifers. We just have to change how we're growing our foodstuffs. And of course, everybody knows about the dead zone down in the Gulf of Mexico. There's actually a dead zone off the coast of every single river in the United States of America. It's just that the Gulf of Mexico happens to be the biggest one. Nitrogen and phosphate fertilizer loss. Over-fertilization causes algae blooms. The algae dies and collapses. It uses all the oxygen trying to decompose it. You've got a dead zone. And America's #1 export by weight happens to be topsoil. Everywhere you see red on this picture is losing approximately 2 millimeters of topsoil per acre per year. 2 millimeters of topsoil per acre, you push it in a pile, happens to be a 20-yard dump truck load full of topsoil. I was just in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them how much a dump truck load of topsoil would cost if you're going to do a permaculture landscape job. $1,000 for a dump truck load of topsoil in Massachusetts. So every single year, all the farmers where the red is occurring have a financial loss of $1,000. Their productivity, their soil is washing away, and it's not on the books. Not on the books. What's also insidious about worldwide, about 38% of the planet's surface is in annual agriculture. In the United States, it's about 54%. So think about an annual plant. As soon as that annual plant is done in September-ish, October at the latest, the soil is bare black dirt for the rest of the year. That is not an ecosystem. It is not providing ecosystem services. It's not providing habitat for wildlife. It's not providing air, water cleaning services, none of that. Oh, and before we go too much further, let's also address this, hemp. Hemp is a great crop, but guess what? Hemp is a perennial crop. In order to grow perennial hemp, let's say you don't want to cut trees down, right? We're going to grow hemp because it grows more fiber per acre. Hemp is an annual field. You got to cut the damn forest down anyways to plow it up to get your hemp seeds in the ground, and it obeys all of the laws of an annual plant. It just does. It's a very useful plant. It has its context, not over 100 zillion acres. Not like this. Not like this. This location here, where this field is in eastern Ohio, central eastern Ohio. There's a historical marker right at the bottom. This was where a party of surveyors came out of the woods during the Jefferson administration. The Western Reserve was land that's not like Ohio and all that stuff, was surveyed by Jefferson, sent out these gangs. Every 6 miles you stop and you write what you see. Their previous stop, they had been in old growth American chestnut forest with trees 10 foot apart. They had a hard time getting their horses through. The understory weeds in this chestnut forest were sugar maples with like 3 and 4 foot diameter trunks with no branches for 60 feet. And they were really bummed out about that because their horses were going hungry. They were going to have to turn around at some point in time or else they wouldn't make it back alive. They finally came out into this clearing here. They noticed about 6 gigantic oak trees per acre, grass all over the place. There were bison, there were deer, there were elk. There were the wildcats, mountain lions hanging out in the trees with the branches dripping with all the things they caught. And the fowl, different kinds of ground nesting birds all over the place were just insane how many birds were there. The thing that they noted the most in their journals was the fact that the grass was over the heads of their horses. This is the most amazingly rich grass they'd ever seen. What they had walked into was a savanna, the pocket of savanna known as the firelands in Ohio. And the savanna biomes worldwide are the biomes that produce the most mammal biomass of any biome. So of course, what do? We go in, we cut it all down, plow it all up, get rid of the stumps. Well, all this zillions of years of organic matter that's accumulated, this incredibly rich soil with no earthworms. There were no native earthworms in this part of Ohio when the Europeans got there. This biological sponge held a tremendous amount of water, so when they tried to plant their corn and wheat in the spring, it was too wet. So you dig a ditch and you drain it all away. 100% of all the problems that these guys experience in agriculture in Ohio right now, we caused. Because we're doing these annual crops and we're using our concepts, which I'll get to. It's a picture of the Dust Bowl from way back in the 30s. Our soil will blow away. It washes away in the water. It'll blow away in the wind. It does. The grandfather on my mom's side of the family lost a family farm during the Dust Bowl years. Things like this are not just history that we read about. Emotional responses to money, government, relationships within the family, responsibility in our family have been colored by the fact that back in 1930, Grandpa lost a farm, and everybody in the family has all these issues. This kind of agriculture permeates all of us. It's family history, it's family stories, and we aren't even aware of how much it's poisoned our lives and our relationships. And what's happened since this era here, if you look in the geological record, and Owen Hablitzel talked about this the other day, when the atomic bomb first went off, If we were to be studying the Earth 10,000 years from now, looking at strata or air, ice core bubbles, we can see that all of a sudden at this certain period of time, everything changed. Our parents may have inherited a rich, abundant, green, luscious, fertile ecosystem. We've inherited a radioactive, plastic-coated, burned-out cinder that's 50% naked half the year, and the weather doesn't even behave. The air isn't the same air that it was 100 years ago. And we could go situations like this a year ago, extreme, long-term, severe drought. Just check out what happened in the Dakotas. All of a sudden, wetter than normal, 1 year apart. So you get the 1,000-year drought followed by the 1,000-year flood. This erratic weather patterns are a reality that we have to deal with, or at least we have to pay attention. And to argue about whether climate change is real or not is like arguing about who built the fiddle that was played when Rome burned. Ladies and gentlemen, Rome is burning, okay? I don't care who made the fiddle. I don't care who made the fiddle. My grandpa may have lost a farm using a team of horses, and we plowed up all this ground. The single largest CO2 release ever measured happened in like the late 1800s. It was when the Europeans showed up and finally had the moldboard plow and oxidized all the topsoil, all of the organic matter in the topsoil in the prairies. This is, take a guess where this is. One word, it's Bakersfield, right up there. There's no reason for people to be here really, at least not 20 million. This is the reason why people really started showing up here. Anytime you have, so we have soil that's blown away, washing away in the wind, it's poison, chemically contaminated. Now we have all this fossil fuel stuff. We've got less and less of it has been discovered. There's a little more blips that should be added here. We've got, we have so much fossil fuel available, right? So why are they going and blasting apart rocks and trying to wring it out to get every last drop? And then the demand curve. When you have a demand curve going like that and the supply not increasing with it, the prices will go up, right? They just will. And what we see here, this is actually an ecological process, believe it or not. When you have a population that's critically dependent on a resource, that population needs to protect and defend that resource. And an example I like to use is like the lionesses go out and they catch a gazelle or a zebra. Notice the gals did the work. In the mammal kingdom worldwide, you just look, the females do most of the work, whether we like to say so or not, they just do. Maybe that's why they aren't heroes, is because they're too busy keeping our sorry asses alive. I mean, what for? Come on. We're not that good, are we? And also, another thing you can observe, too, is the males are the more ornate. Look all the way through the mammal kingdom. The males are always the more colorful, the more beautiful hair. How do you like my hair? Anyways, so the lionesses do all the work. The guys go chase the girls away. They're eating on the zebra. Well, meanwhile, the feces, what are they called? F-I-S-I, not feces. The hyenas are slinking around the outside. Now, hyenas will hunt. But they won't hunt big prey because they can't do it alone. And so all of a sudden when there's a kill, something snaps inside of them. And they line up in this hierarchical top-down order that it's like instant response to the boss man who's the biggest, most belligerent, badass guy, and they chase the lions away from the zebra. That's just what they do. Well, we are desperately hooked on this dead zebra out in the Serengeti. We're going to chase away every lion that tries to get our dead zebra. It's no different. And then, why on earth, how many of you guys, I'm not going to ask that question. All right, how many of you guys have a job that you really love and you can't wait to wake up every morning just to go do it because it's just so awesome? You guys are some of the luckiest people in the world. Very few hands usually go up in an audience. So that tells me a little bit about who permaculturists are and what permaculturists are. We're starting to walk away from Rome. The difference between now and Roman times, when people could just walk away from Rome, is we have yet to create the structure that will support us. We have yet to create the real alternative that creates the foods, fuels, medicines, and fibers that we need. And to keep thinking that we're going to be doing it in our backyard is a hallucination like the rain barrel. We have to design something real based on reality, and we have to create it about as fast as we can. About as fast as we can. Now, one of the permaculture design principles, because I trained a long time ago that I really started to bug me. It's like, well, why is it that so many permaculturists are jumping way ahead and they forgot about this part? We're going to observe and imitate nature and work with nature rather than fight against it. If you've ever had an herb spiral and tried to keep the damn weeds out of it, that's fighting against nature. And because you got so many surface areas exposed, you have like so many more weeds than ever before. It's like this Why didn't we observe and imitate nature? How many of you guys have ever seen brush growing on the side of the road? Who planted it? Who plowed it? Who sprayed fungicide, herbicide, fertilizer? Nobody. Did anybody study any guilds to see which plants go with which? No, they've sorted this out over millions and millions and millions of years. Nature's got all the answers we need. Just go read the book of nature. We want to work with it rather than fight against it. So number one that we do is we observe where we are, what belongs there, and we'll imitate that. Now, before we get off too far along, there's something very, very fundamental that I want to address here. In order to observe, we have to know the difference between an observation and a concept. Now, an observation is something you can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, measure with instruments, derive through tests. And it's something, if I write the protocol of how we observe this phenomenon, if I give it to you, you'll be able to observe the same thing. If I give it to you, you can observe the same thing, and so on and so on and so on. It's something that has a basis in reality, and it's an observable phenomena. We can all observe it. A concept, however, is an intellectual idea created in the mind that supposedly helps to explain these observable phenomena. However, it doesn't always work that way. Who's ever heard of invasive species? Okay, name one organism on the face of the planet that has a concept called invasion. Human beings. When you start looking at reality through the lens of your concepts, you'll see your concept. So 99% of all invasion science is, how do we fight the invasion? How do we fight the invasion? How many of you guys have an apple orchard? We got a couple, good. This will be good for you guys. Did you know that 100% all, that's a lot, isn't it? Every single problem that you will encounter in an apple orchard is because you are looking at the world through the lens, through the concept of orchard, and you are requesting that nature comply with your silly little idea. Nature is not an orchard, and it will not obey. No matter how hard you try to force nature to be an orchard, it won't do it. You can bring out all the chemical guns in the world. Keep clapping, Paul, right? So we need to know the power of our concepts and to be able to just like put them away for a while. Just like, what's really going on here? What's really going on? And one that really strikes me, how many have heard like, if you like plant seeds from an apple, it may take 1,000 apple seeds to get one good variety. So don't bother saving your seeds, right? You guys heard that before? It may actually be an observation that it may take 1,000 seeds to get one good variety. But then don't bother to plant your seeds. It's not a helpful concept. If I use the same observable phenomena, the same observable facts here, it takes 1,000 seeds to grow one good apple variety. And then I change the concept to how many apple seeds do I have to plant in order to get 5 good varieties? What has the difference been in the world if we just change that silly little concept that's not helping us? We would have millions and millions and millions of new varieties, apple varieties that we can plant and we can take care of them with sheer, total, utter neglect. They're pest and disease resistant. They can deal with the new atmosphere that we have going on, radioactivity, all that kinds of stuff. We need to put the seeds in the ground by the zillion. So we're going to plant this farm. Long story how we got there. But we started with a couple of design premises. Prior to European arrival, our place supported a rich abundance of life. It was photosynthetically productive, and it did so for a long time with no fossil fuels, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides. Can we design a farming system that way? Absolutely. Can we provide our staple food crops this way? Absolutely. And can it be economically viable within the current system? This is the big bugaboo and a trick that every farmer has to work with. This picture, by the way, that you see was measured by a couple of students from University of Illinois. This system right here outproduced corn in total calories per acre by 30%. The nutrition per acre here wasn't even close. Corn isn't nutritious. Corn is actually, if you eat it, is toxic. In order to eat grains, annual grains and legumes in nature, organisms have two things. One's called a crop, one's called a gizzard. We have neither. So in order for us to actually eat these things, these grains and legumes, we have to ferment them or cook them excessively, which is kind of its own kind of insanity. And if they're not nutritious, and if you look at the nutritional analysis, there's more deficiencies than there are sufficiencies in annual grains and legumes. If they're not nutritious, I don't call them food because we're not designed to digest them. What are they? I postulate that they are addictive substances, non-nutritive addictive substances. And if you don't believe me, it should be simple enough to just quit for 30 days. For 30 days, I'm not going to eat any annual grains or annual legumes. And if you say, well, no, they're not addictive, you're in the first stage of addiction, and that's denial. Give it a try. Now, how are we going to create a permaculture future if people who are permaculture consumers still keep eating Rome's shit, right? Walk away from Rome. Now, what we have to do, we identify our biome and its keystone species that have economic and food value. We do our earthworks to manage our water resource. We establish edible woody polycultures. This parallels the yeoman's scale of permanence. Build your fences and roads, establish your agroforestry practices, and manage it forever. And just a super brief synopsis, I've tried to do keyline design according to the yeoman's book for 20 years now. I know very few people who've read the book all the way through, Water for Every Farm. Of the people who've read it all the way through, I only know a handful who've actually done it and tried it on the land. Of those handful, 4 of them have been doing it for about 20 years. And of those 4, we all do it different. Something's going on. Locate the key point. Good. Well, that's also kind of a key point, too. We live in a fractal universe. There's big key points, little key points, and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. There and there and there and there. It doesn't matter. I don't give a rip where you locate the system. The point is to take water from the valleys, spread it down towards the ridges. And what we're doing is we're designing systems that are machinable, parallel alleys, and soaking water in, hydrating the system, and getting some air into the soil, getting perennial cover in there so the roots go deep. Is that or is that not a far more perennial system than ever was before? And like Jeff Lawton said last night, you will have to actively destroy a permaculture system in order to stop it from doing good. So it has to be actively destroyed if you want to stop it from doing good. So you end up with a system like this. Some crazy nut went out and did all the keyline whatever. Formerly, the water had gone here, it now goes around there. Every single ridge, every single valley is all sculpted to do this. We use the Keyline subsoiler to help increase the organic matter with root decomposition. We use grazing animals to graze the grass down. And we have turned this farm right here, used to be red clay soil. The water used to run down that way, now comes out towards the ridge. It used to be red clay soil that we've now turned into what passes as a topsoil. Now, it's not chocolate cake, but it's topsoil. And this is what it kind of looks like, and how I got some evidence, photographic evidence of the red clay. I have soil tests to do this, but there's no researchers that have claimed that Keyline works. Look at the soil here. This has been actively farmed. By actively farming an old cornfield, we can turn it into paradise in just a few short years. And look at the road, the red clay tire tracks in the road. We've converted the red clay into topsoil. 15 years. If I go home and I do this at my place, and you go home and do it at your place, if every one person does their site and then convinces one other person to do it, it only takes 30 people before the whole entire planet is doing this. So that means that in 15 years, we can revegetate the whole entire planet at a profit. And my goodness, aren't the opportunities huge? I think so. And so I was the only one at the previous speaker's talk. They said, well, I claim to be the loudest voice in permaculture, and I, have the most influence in permaculture. And I was the only one that raised my hand. I said, no, you aren't. The person who has the most influence in permaculture is the person who's putting roots in the ground. You could be totally silent, and you're making something real that long after the big white blowhards go away, we've got trees. We got trees, we got ecosystems, and if we're going to scale agriculture, and Jeff Lawton said so the other night too, at least we agree on that, in order to scale agriculture, we have to go to the ecosystem as our model. So we're designing ecosystem mimics. And what I'm just going to cover briefly is the oak savanna. That's the eastern version. Going from taller to short, you can plant all these trees in the same spot. They'll sort themselves out by height, they're compatible. Anytime you see any gray or black on this map, this was oak savanna, and these are the families of species. We don't need to have books written on how to invent guilds. We have guilds that have been here for hundreds of millions of years that will produce all of the foods that we want and need. California. Oaks, chestnut, apples, hazelnut, almonds, cherries, plums, apricots. This is just the oak savanna model. There's how many different biomes in this California region with all kinds of opportunity, not just for play, but as a economic model for our farms, And the pines, pines, beech, cherries, plums, serviceberry, hazelnut, Siberian peach, blueberry, does anybody think that these species have any kind of potential for food? Does anybody think that this would, oh, you can't design a farm based on pine nuts and, cherries and plums and service and hazelnuts? They're adapted to dry sites, wet sites, far north. This is the biome where we came from as human beings, whether it was the Garden of Eden or the Olduvai Gorge in East Central Africa. We walked out of the savannas. One of the reasons why the savanna can support so many mammals is that it captures so much more energy than an annual crop field will. There's research coming mostly out of New York that I've read that short rotation woody cropping systems can capture 3 to 7 times the energy per acre as a crop field. In part, that's because it's deep three-dimensionality. There's more surface area exposed to the sun. More surface area, which is critical here, exposed to the atmosphere, because 99.9% of a plant's body is made out of the atmosphere. We're actually atmosphere farmers. So we're going to capture more of this atmosphere. And what's up in the atmosphere, especially here, early morning and late evenings, you got all this condensation coming right off the ocean. You have all the water you want, you got to catch it out of the air. The more surface area we have exposed to that, the more condensation we can get. Doesn't it kind of look like this? And look at that, the savannas, trees and shrubs and bushes and vines and lots of grass and lots of animals. What was the dominant grazing animal right here before people got here? Elephants. This is like the elephant savanna homeland. La Brea tar pits is just loaded with elephants. They're the mega landscape managers. They tear down these big trees that nobody can get to anymore. All of the savanna species that I just mentioned in those previous slides sprout back from the roots when you harass them. So when the Canadians come down and invade us and cut all of our trees down, we don't care. It's sprouting back next year. And because we've been doing our breeding work and we're selecting for highly reproductive, precocious plants, they sprout back and there's our food again. We got it. Although I am trying to breed elephants, I find it kind of difficult to lift up their back legs, but we can use substitutes, analogs. How about cowies and piggies and turkeys and chickens and sheepsies? All these really cool things that people already recognize. I can be a vegetarian. I can be a vegetarian, eat off the trees. And I'm using these not as my business, but they're the managers. They are the tool that I'm using to develop this system. So we're using the animals as managers to increase the overall health of the ecological system, which is what they did long term ago. So theoretically, without having to plow every year, fertilizer, herbicide, these guys are doing pest control, disease control, obviously mowing. They're doing pruning on the branches. They're doing all the work. So theoretically, we should end up with more of this in the bank, or not necessarily more, at least enough to kind of be here again next year. And we've been doing it for 20 years, and it works. Just briefly, chestnuts. It's basically the equivalent of a corn that grows on a tree. High carbohydrate, 4% protein. It's a complete protein. Apples for food, juice, vinegar, alcohol. We've been certified organic since 1995, and we've used no sprays ever. Never. We just don't. When the ecosystem comes into balance, we have all the pests and all diseases you possibly want, but they're not of a huge threshold so as to be a detriment to the system. And if we do have a bad year and you lose all of one crop or the other, we've got other crops. Hazelnuts, high protein, 3 times the oil as a soybean. You take some of your alcohol, your apple cider that you brewed that didn't taste very good, you distill it. The tops, the third that comes off the top is poisonous. It'll make you go blind. It's fusel oils and methanol. You blend 20% tops with 80% oil, put it in a barrel, shove it in the corner, walk away for it for a year. You don't need these high-tech reactor smacker things. Put it in the corner and it turns into diesel fuel in a year. Or better yet, convert your equipment to run on straight vegetable oil and grow all your own oil crops. Now, in order to transition from where a crop field is now, let's say it's just an annual field, how do you do that? Well, there's a number of different agroforestry practices. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll be talking about alley cropping and silvopasture extensively. Basically growing your cash crop in between rows of trees. You plant a row of trees. Now, this is a bigger farmer in Illinois that I've worked with. In order to get a big ag guy to go ahead and do agroforestry, that's a real stretch. If I was to go right up to him and say, hey man, do like 85,000 different layers and all these different ones, he's like, wee, purple hankies. But if I say you can still use atrazine, you can still use Princep and Prowl, you can still Fusilade and Vantage and do your weed control in your crop, and it takes care of the weed control so your grandchildren have trees. Then because he's heard me do the Kool-Aid talk, after a while he drives by and says, you know what, I could do something in there. My daughter wants to start a flower business. My grandson wants to do raspberries. We could raise chickens in there, pulling them up and down. They'll start to see the opportunities. This is alley cropping on our farm. This is a perennial crop, asparagus between polyculture chestnut rows. with chestnut, apple, mulberry, elderberry, raspberry, currants, grapes, and then 5 species of livestock that rotate through the system. We're using the livestock to drive the ecological succession of the system and make it more fertile and abundant. We can create soil. We turn red clay into topsoil. Design for and grow your own fuel based on actual fuel use. Real cool idea. Let's go out to the Kentucky Fried Chicken down the road and get their fry later grease on Friday when they're done with it. You put it in your car after you buy a $35,000 reactor in your garage, and you have 10 gallons of fuel. What does that do for you? Sit down. All right, how much fuel do we use? What is it going to take for me to provide that fuel for my needs? Grow it. Not a mystery. I'm a part of an oil cartel where we have an oil press truck with filters and dewaterers, and we'll grow oil crops that get pressed. The trailer can go from farm to farm to farm. We have, because there was a gang of us, we all stuck together. We got a discount rate on the conversion kits to convert our vehicles to run on vegetable oil, so we run on homegrown, locally produced vegetable oil, and then the press cake is livestock feed. We're not taking food away from the human food system. We're actually helping to cook food for the human food system, because many of the growers are growing their oil, their sunflower oil, for sell to a potato chip company, and then we get the potato chip oil back. But it has to be designed on reality. And in the Midwest anyways, dairy farms have got the most numbers on it. You only need 10% of your crop in an oil seed, and you've fueled your whole entire farm. Now if you go perennial like me, we only need, if we were to do sunflowers, only 3 acres of sunflowers will power the whole farm. Silvopastures, when we manage the integration of livestock and woody crops, we were intending to plant trees and grow trees in a savanna system. And we're using the animals to maintain it. They're doing the weed control, they're doing the fertilizer, they're pruning the branches off for us. So long term, we have a high-value timber crop, we have firewood, logs from mushroom logs, a nice even shade so the ground doesn't cook. We're building soil. Pasture for hogs, all kinds of walnuts and mulberries. And if you're going to grow just walnuts for timber, you're going to have to prune it to make them nice and straight. You're going to have to do some kind of weed control, some kind of fertilizer, some kind of pest control. So instead of going out there and working, why not send these guys to work? They volunteer every morning. They go to work and they prune the branches off you. They mow down the grass. They trample it all, and they poop all over the place. This is a living, breathing, growing, expanding, healthy, recovering ecosystem. That was a cornfield 15 years prior to that picture. Bare black dirt. Now, I'm also not talking about backyard permaculture here. I'm talking about food. And we're talking about large scale. There are 7 billion of us out here. In order to go from a system, like some propose, that is all entirely small, locally grown, currently right now we're not. It's massive international trade. In order to go from massive international trade to small, locally grown, you can't do it overnight. Because it's impossible to take 90% of the population and go, whoom, now you're all gardeners. And who wants to be I am, but not everybody wants to be an earth peasant. What we need to do is now design farms that are mechanically harvestable. All the equipment exists for all the species that I mentioned in these polyculture systems for harvesting worldwide. Worldwide, these crops are industrially grown, industrially produced, and harvested by machine. This is apples in South Africa. They produce 50% of the world's apple ethanol. Crap, there's like the size of Oregon, and they've grown 50% of the world's apple ethanol. What the heck happened in the United States of America? I mean, California, the Central Valley is probably bigger than all of South Africa. Why aren't they producing all of their own fuel and harvesting with machines? France, Germany. Yeah, you guys don't have to clap. You can just be quiet. Take a nap. This is me driving a straddle harvester that's harvesting hazelnuts, bush hazelnuts. I find it a little bit insane that, like with hazelnut, especially in the Pacific Northwest, here's a tall shrub, multi-stem shrub. They prune it back in order to be a tree because we have this concept of what an orchard is. And so it's not behaving like an orchard, so we do work to make it behave better. Well, then all this root energy comes up, and it can't find release in the stems, so it becomes tangled up in the branches, so you got to go prune that again. Twice the work because we have a concept of what these things should do, instead of saying, hey, look, hazelnuts are a shrub. Let's deal with them as shrubs. A lot easier that way. There's a sweeper, a nut sweeper. It'll pick up walnuts, pecans, hickory nuts, chestnuts, golf balls, dog poop, you name it. And so what we're talking about doing is permaculture to scale, at the ecosystem scale. Imitate your natural ecosystem, replace the keystone species with improved varieties of the particular woody crops in question, grow them like bushy jungles like nature does, harvest them by machine, process them by machine, transport them by machine. This is a black walnut facility in Missouri. And you know what? This whole Food Safety Modernization Act, oh, let's fight against, comply. Let's comply. We're going to comply, and then we'll trump you one because we do it better than you do. We'll comply with absolutely everything. All right, let's do a little math here. Usually if we're in an audience where somebody can run up to the screen, I say, all right, somebody, point to the apple tree. And I start counting. And usually 15 or 20 seconds go by before somebody can finally point to it. Well, guess what? Pests can't find it either. If we have things, this is a little deceiving though. This isn't it's deceiving because the rows go left to right on the screen and I'm taking a picture through the row. There's a row of one polyculture, a row of the other polyculture, a row of one, a row of the other. I took this picture on a day when I walked by and there was an eastern kingbird up here. They're an insectivorous bird. They fly up and out. They fly down and out. They'll catch bugs right out of the air. Over here was the eastern phoebe. It flies up and catches the bugs, goes and sometimes it'll pounce on the ground. So it's got this zone covered. And down in here somewhere there was an eastern bluebird and they're pounce hunters, pouncing all over the ground, eating insects. They're eating my pests. They're pest control. And it's a eastern kingbird is not on anybody's threatened or endangered list, but it's very, very threatened. We've got loggerhead shrikes. We've got 3 different species of weasel. The wildlife that shows up in systems like this is phenomenal. We're actually restoring ecologies while farming it. Also in here, I'll drive by or walk by and get this sticky thing on my neck, and I react and go, ah, and it's tree frog. Well, that sounds cool, but what you have to notice is we're on this ridge. Where we're at is, it's like the Grand Canyon of the Midwest. As the ice melted, there's this uplift, and it made this Grand Canyon because there's enough moisture the trees grow. Up on the ridges is the big, huge flat farms. Then right here where we are is on the shoulders. It drops down real steep, and then there's big flat farms at the bottom. There is no surface water, no ponds, rivers, brooks, streams, lakes within 1.5 miles of our farm. And yet somehow we've got 7 different species of amphibians living here. Tree frogs, toads that live on the ground. They're the only creature that's been observed so far to eat plum curculio, one of the biggest pests in apples. So we have a natural ecosystem, and why would I spray any kind of insect control when I know that amphibians get 50% of their oxygen right through their skin? So I go spray to kill bugs, and I make my bug killers sick. You're shooting yourself in the foot. So let's go through the system a little bit. Do some math. Potentially 3 to 7 times the energy capture per acre as an annual crop field. We improve the resource base. I'm still looking for someone who will volunteer this. I've done a project in Africa where I challenged the local farmers. Okay, you guys take your best plot of land, your best, most fertile, rich, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you see that flat rock right over there? That flat rock, within 1 year, we're going to be kicking your butts with the amount of food that we can grow on that rock. It only took 4 months to do that. I'm still looking for someone who has a 4-acre rock in the middle of Lake Superior or Spednick Lake in Maine, and I will show you how to farm that rock. The processes that we are working with build the soil. They create the soil. Everybody's seen trees growing out of cliffs, right? You don't have to prepare the whole 7 years in advance and blah, blah, blah. Put the trees in the ground. Now spend the rest of your life taking care of them. We improve the resource base. We're making soil. We're cleaning up the air, cleaning up the water. It's perennial. It reproduces itself. We can sell seedlings. We can sell grafted material. We can sell cuttings for grafts. We can sell sticks for basketry, for making fences. I sell a lot of fence poles, actually. There's no plowing, no cultivating, no pest or disease control once established. You get a year-round harvest. My harvests start as soon as I get back home, and then they continue until November when all the animals go to sleep in the freezer. What's also nice about it being based on woody plants, I took a vacation 4 years ago. How many farmers you know went on a vacation? If you go on vacation from your corn and you come back, it's gone. It's, you know, it either died and fell over, deer ate it, or whatever. We went on vacation and came back, the trees were a year bigger. You're a year older. They're doing fine. There's no erosion, it's non-toxic, it's beautiful. If you don't think it's beautiful, and I see someone in the audience, I'm sure you must not think it's beautiful, get some black plastic edging and put it around here, and then put down some newspaper, and then scatter that pink spray-painted bark mulch on top, then it's beautiful. Yeah, it would look different. It would look different in a suburban setting. You'd probably want to doctor it up a little bit. That's working with nature. Working with nature. This, on the other hand, is not. This is not. And if you're eating annual grains and legumes, this is your food. If you're eating organic annual grains and legumes, this is your food. If you're vegan and you're eating annual grains and legumes, this is your food. Let's switch to perennials, folks. Let's be the market pull that forces guys like me to have to plant more acreage. Actually, true story. We can't keep up with the demand. There's no such thing as a niche market anymore. There's so much demand for the products that we grow, we can't produce enough of it. And so all of this myth about all these young folks want to get into farming, want to get into farming, want to get into farming. Well, get into farming. There's land all over the place. So many times we've taken young farmer A and person B whose kids don't want to take over. They say, just use my land. I'll farm it for free. Okay, here you go. You work together. And the young person's like, ah! You mean, like, I have to be responsible for myself? I have to, like, figure out how to pay my own bills? Yeah, you're not going to get a salary and a groovy crash pad to hang out and smoke dope with your buddies and wake up at 11 o'clock in the morning. This is agriculture. This stuff, it degrades the resource base. Every time you're doing any kind of tillage of the soil, you're oxidizing that organic matter, you're in degradation. When we obey and mimic the process of succession and develop its ecosystem over time, and tomorrow I'll show a lot of time sequenced pictures of what it looked like in the early years, next and next and next. It's different every year. We're in the phase of aggradation, building soil and building biodiversity and so on. There's soil erosion in these systems, chemical contamination, plowing, herbicide, pesticide, fungicides, fertilizers, year after year after year after year. There's only one crop, one market. It's total risk exposure. What if, if you're going to plant soybeans here and some kind of soybean rust comes through and wipes you out, you're done. You're absolutely done. If I got soybeans in my system, it's maybe 1 or 2%. If I grew soybeans, I don't. I'd lose my soybeans, so what? What's 1 or 2%? Something else compensates for it. It might be a bumper crop for strawberries or apples. This is a degraded resource base, degraded small towns culture. The Midwest is loaded with not ghost towns like you see at Knott's Berry Farm there, but like ghost towns where people have moved out and there's infrastructure in collapse because there's not enough critical mass of agricultural economy going on. It's all like two big fat white guys on 1 million acres going, bleh. Actually it's not them. They're at home and they're playing on the computers and they're hiring their agricultural guest workers from Mexico to come up and do the work for them. That's kind of twisted. That's a really twisted way to get our food. So stop eating that shit. Walk away from Rome. Where does this lead? Where does this kind of agriculture lead? Over and over and over again. Every single time that a culture depended on annual plants for its staple food crops, its carbohydrates, proteins, and oils. Every time, do the homework, it's ended in collapse. Aside from the work projects administration stuff that happens toward the end times, these guys up here start yelling at these guys down there saying, pick yourselves up by the bootstraps. I can remember when Dad gave me $5 million, I had nothing. I had to pick myself up by the bootstraps and make everything I have today. And these guys say, well, you know what? Why don't you let something trickle down besides piss? These guys get mad at these get mad at those guys, and both of them have elements of the truth. They're right within a certain context. These guys are right within a certain context, but they miss the point. This whole entire culture based on annual foods has to destroy the ecosystem in order to plant its little hard seeds in the ground, and that has to stop. That has to stop. We can do this. We can do that if you want. Or we can go somewhere like this. This is a remnant oak savanna opening on our particular farm, and these trees, a core was taken out of this one. They're 300 years old. So this is evidence, factual evidence, that this place was an oak savanna 300 years ago. So why not imitate that? Instead, I got to go to Amazon and buy a book and tell me which plants to plant with each other. No, you just go look out. Here we go. Use these species. This is where I'm going. I'm not interested in going here, but if I went here, this is what I would do. This is Palmyra in Syria. Currently, right now, there is an artillery battalion up on top here. An artillery battalion on the top of a historic fortress in Syria, surrounded by wasteland, is what annual agriculture civilization does. This is the 10,000-year end game for the system, and we have to create the new system that comes out of this. It's our job. No more screwing around. So I do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Yeah, and we get a good laugh, but you know what? The ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world and then get off their asses and actually do something about it, something real about it, we're the ones who do. And I'm a permaculturist. I am not afraid of change. I am terrified of change, and I am the change. What I want to point out one more thing here is we can't see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, or smell it. We can't even measure it with instruments. We can kind of derive it through tests, but not really. There are invisible currents of unimaginable power flowing through this whole entire universe. And if you could go in your mind just quickly to one of the last scenes in The Lord of the Rings, when finally the ring went into the lake of fire and the tower comes down. And then we have within our core the ultimate power of unquenchable, unbeatable, undefatigable love. And it's not just a groovy little sentiment. Sometimes it's a gorilla ass-biting love. Sometimes it's a mother screaming in childbirth. Sometimes it's a cat defending her kittens. Sometimes it's a wild-ass crazy bugger with 2 swords and hair all over the place defending his family. We have the power of love on our side, and we're going to leverage it for all we've got. We're going to change the world. So, thank you. And if you want to find out, follow more of my stuff, I know Paul Wooten already dissed me, or not, Paul didn't. Yeah, you didn't diss me personally, but you basically said this. It's like, oh yeah, then there's these guys with no web presence. I would rather have an earth site than a website. I'm sorry. I walked away from Rome when I was 22 years old. I have not had a full-time job since then, okay, and I'm 50. So we don't have to play Rome's game. I have lived on this planet, not looking at it. Step out, go into it, interact with it, and let's change the change. Mark Shepard, Restoration Agriculture. Carry on.